this is my weekly box office update. This week I'm going to be talking about Secret Superstar, Gomel Agad, and Mirzul, which are still in theaters and are still making money. But I'm also going to be talking about our new release, Ittefaq, which is much more interesting, at least to me. So, Gomel Agad, Secret Superstar, and Mirzul, how are they doing? It's essentially the sequel to how they were doing last week. None of them are doing that well in America. Everything's sort of bleh in American box office. In the UK, Mirzul is still doing surprisingly well. It's not doing great, but it's doing much better than I've seen a Tamil film do before. Secret Superstar is holding a little more steady. And that's just the nature of Secret Superstar. It's the kind of movie that people aren't going to rush out to see opening weekend, but they'll get to it eventually. So it's not quite as big of a, woo, opening weekend drop as other films might be. So that's the UK. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, everything is doing shockingly good still. I don't know what happened in those countries, but something like light bulb went off and all of a sudden people want to see movies again, which is amazing. I hope it happens all over the world soon. Mirzul is the one that's really remarkable, especially in Australia. I don't know how it's getting such an amazing box office or what's happening there, but people just love it. New Zealand, similar. Canada, not quite as big, but still big. It's doing better in Canada than the new Punjabi release, which is remarkable. So something is still going on with Mirzul. It might just be, considering these are three areas where Hindi films have not been doing well for a long time, but Punjabi has, it might just be that they're looking for that sort of rousing, action, fun, big film, and I don't know what this new Punjabi release is, but maybe it's not providing that, and maybe the Hindi films aren't providing that either, so the audience is swinging to Tamil to get that sort of really, this feels like real Indian film feeling, instead of this feels like glossy, prepackaged, sold for the overseas audience feeling. So that's what's going on with those movies. Ittefaq, that's the one I'm excited about. Ittefaq is doing consistently okay all over the world. It's not like Mirzul, where there were these spectacular record-breaking box offices in some places, but it's consistent globally, which has not been the case so far this year. And it's consistently solid globally, not spectacular in one place and terrible everywhere else, which has also not been the case this year. This is essentially the kind of box office I was used to seeing a year and a half ago when I started tracking box office. So for a film that doesn't have a big promotional campaign, doesn't have big stars in it, doesn't have a big selling point, like Padmavati, for instance, even if you removed the stars, you still had the spectacle and everything. So for a movie that doesn't have any of that, it's making about $3,500 to $4,000 per screen, which is what I was consistently seeing just a year ago for a film like this. $3,500 to $4,000 per screen opening weekend, and then for a larger film, a con film, a film that does have those big selling points, I was seeing $5,000 to $8,000, usually around $6,000 per screen opening weekend. And that has dropped off unbelievably this year. That has dropped down to $4,000 maybe in some markets for Job Harry Met Sejal, $2,000 for Tube Light. It's just been terrible. So to see this movie do what it should be doing, do a solid $4,000 to $3,500 per screen, that tells me the audience is showing up the way they should be. They're not rushing in opening weekend because there's nothing to make them rush in. They haven't seen the big star or everything, but they're coming to see the movie just because it's a new movie. That's what we've been missing, the sense of people just showing up because they want to see the movie instead of staying away for reasons that are hard to understand. And like I said, it's consistent globally. There's nothing particular about the national culture or something like this that is causing people to stay away from this film. It's released in such a neutral fashion that it doesn't matter where you are, the same number of people will want to see this film. My hope is that this continues as the trend that I saw last year, which would be that it opens $3,500 to $4,000 per screen and then stays steady or goes up the next week. This could be the film that does that. This is a fairly rare thing, especially now, because the promotion and wide release strategy is get everybody in there first weekend and then don't worry about second weekend. This film only released on 67 screens in America. That's lower than almost anything so far this year. Gomel Agad, in its third week, is still running on over 100 screens and only making a little over 1,000 per screen. It's not a good strategy. But 67 screens, that means there's room to grow. That means if word of mouth is good, which I suspect it will be, in the second weekend, then they can hop up to 80 screens. That's what happened with Nirja last year. Nirja did good first weekend, unbelievably good second weekend, and on 20 more screens. And it kept growing, I think, for the first 3 weeks, both in terms of per screen box office and number of screens it was playing on, and then it started dropping off. And that was extremely healthy. Because if you think about it from the in terms of the theater owner, they don't need the big box office one weekend. They need a profit every single weekend because they have to keep paying their staff and their rent and their electricity bill every single weekend. So if Ittefaq does okay this week, and then opens on a few more screens next week and still does okay next week, and then does okay the third week and the fourth week and the fifth week, that's a month of profits and a month of customers coming in for the movie theater that's playing it. The other part of this that's important is to think about the other films that are coming out. Something like Padmavati, for instance, that is probably going to try to take every single screen in America, which means a film like, what's the title? Kiti Single, which is coming out next week, would not have any screens left for it. In fact, that may cause trouble for it. So it's coming out next week. It's definitely going to be a word of mouth kind of film. So first weekend, low-ish. Second weekend, steady, maybe building as people hear about it. Third weekend, it's already out of theaters because it has to make space for Padmavati. That's the problem with these wide releases. It's not just for the film itself that's being given a wide release. It's for all the other movies that it's swallowing up before they have a chance to grow because it's knocking out their long run in movie theaters. Ittefaq, not so much. Gomal again still has plenty of space to run. Mirzel still has plenty of space to run. All of the movies that came out 2-3 weeks ago still have plenty of space to run. Next weekend, even if it gains a few screens, Kiti Single is still going to have plenty of space to run and to grow if it wants to in the week after that. This is healthy. This is healthy for the industry as a whole, to have this solid, small release film. And I think part of the reason it's so solid is because there was no promotions and there was no selling point. It's not a huge film. The problem with a huge film in today's world is you can feel like you've already seen it before it even comes out. There's so many teasers and so many trailers and so many behind the scenes looks and so many interviews to crawl through that you feel like you already know the plot and you've already seen the best bits of the film. And what that often turns into is feeling like you already even have an opinion on the film. Before the movie comes out, you're saying, oh, this is no good. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, I've seen it all already. And then nobody shows up because everyone feels like they've already seen it. Ittefaq avoided that. They gave us one trailer, they gave us one song that was really just extension of the trailer, and they gave us one press conference. The stars weren't everywhere, the posters weren't everywhere. You really didn't know much about the movie, and I think it made people more willing to check the movie out, more interested to see, okay, what is this thing? I know generally what the mood's gonna be, but I don't know anything else about it. And my hope is that the people who checked it out liked it, because I liked it. It's a very well-made movie. That's the other important part of this. If you don't have a promotion campaign to drive people in on that first weekend, you have to trust your product. You have to believe that, yes, this is a product that people will talk about and will want to come back for. I think a lot of movies this year have been films that people would have wanted to come back for, would have talked about, but were over-promoted, so they weren't released in a way that that happened. So this movie is not unique in its high quality. It's a very good film, but it's not the best film of the year or the only film that's been like this year. But it is unique in its release. This low-key promotion, this modest number of screens, this obviously the goal is to make a small film that will do well and not drive everybody else out of theaters because this is the only one they'll want to see. So that's why I'm excited about Ittefaq. Mirzel, Secret Superstar, Gomal again, they're fine, but Ittefaq is the big exciting story this week, and I'm very curious to see how it does next week. If you agree with anything I said, if you disagree, if you have any comments, hop on over to my blog. There's a link right below, and you can leave me a message there. Thanks. Bye.